Are the Mets close to being a powerhouse in 2025?
I don't see any reason why any Met fan would not believe right now the Mets are in position to be just that, a powerhouse. You talk about the young talent, guys like Vientos and Alvarez, young, controllable. You have the cornerstones, the Nimos, the Lindors, the financial flexibility that the Mets have talked about, $170-ish million coming off the books, going into an offseason, and a wealth of young players in the minor leagues who can fight and earn the at-bats that they are going to utilize and produce in at the major league level one day. Guys like Drew Gilbert, guys like Luis Angel Acuna, the Ronnie Mauricios of the world, the Brett Beattys of the world, who the Mets don't have to necessarily hand a job to, but let them earn it and run with it. Like we saw from Mark Vientos in 2024 on his way to hitting 32 entire home runs. So yes, Vito, this Mets team in 2025 is about to become a powerhouse.
Hey guys, welcome to what is, let's call it the first official offseason episode. I don't count the last recap as the offseason, even though like by all technicalities it was. But this is the first offseason episode of Meet at the Apple. I'm Vito Calisi. You can follow me on Twitter at Vito F. Calisi. That's Jonathan Barron at JMB9191. We're here at Citi Field. It's officially the Mets offseason. And before we do our big episode that we're going to do next week, where we kind of like recap our favorite moments of the season, we wanted to do a different kind of episode of not only looking at what the team was able to accomplish this year, but also start looking forward to next year and lay the groundwork for what the Mets need to do to go a step further than the NLCS.
Yeah, and this is not going to be just a one-time episode.
No.
Hi, Vito, by the way. And hello, everyone out there. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, kind of quick turnaround. Like you mentioned, the episode we did out on Sunday night, that was
emotional.
That was emotions. It was therapeutic, honestly. Like the next morning I listened to it, and I was happy we did it. And all the back and forth and exchange online that fans had with each other and interacting, and all the comments that we had on the video
and Twitter.
Yeah, it was important to do that and talk through our feelings. But I realized after we didn't acknowledge Pete Alonso, who played in all 175 games for the Mets this year, or Brandon Nimmo, who gutted out one of the most painful injuries that a baseball player can deal with, plantar fasciitis. For him to do what he did was unbelievable. So those are just a couple of things that we didn't really address properly. But also now that we've kind of had a couple of days to let our emotions run their course, it's back to business. And I know that it's business for the front office. It's business here at Citi Field.
People are like,
it's 2025 time.
Yeah, I mean, look, you would think that before the World Series is over, you would think that a team that gets eliminated, the front office would be quiet.
Well, they also put 6 days in between the end of the LCS and the World Series.
But what I mean is,
season's going to start before the World Series begins.
What I mean is, like, you would think that there was some quiet time. There's really not. Baseball, sports in general are year-round now. Every single sport. Football's year-round. Basketball's year-round. Everything is year-round. And this place is moving like any other time of the year.
Well, it's funny because not usually, but if you don't make the playoffs.
Yeah.
We would have already been like 3-4 weeks into an offseason. That's 4 whole business weeks.
Yeah.
That time flew by. I mean, we're about to have.
And think about it. When you get eliminated, when you know you're not making the playoffs, you also start to have those 2025 conversations a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so the timeline totally changes. I mean, it's already almost election day. It doesn't feel like that whatsoever.
No.
So time has flown. Next thing you know, Thanksgiving is going to be here. We're literally like 3.5-4 weeks away from Thanksgiving now.
Yeah.
And then you get into the holiday season, and then, all the company parties and all the family parties and Friendsgiving and all that.
What NFL week is it right now?
I think it's week 8.
Yeah.
So we're going into week 8.
We're halfway through the football season right now.
Yeah, we're basically just about halfway through. Time is flying. And the point is, before we know it, pitchers and catchers are going to be here. Before we know it, the winter meetings are going to be here. And a lot of crazy stuff's going to happen. It's going to be a crazy transactional period. Some teams will act fast. Some teams will act slow. There's a couple big free agencies that are about to happen this year. So we thought it was a good time to delve into the Mets roster construction as it stands right now, what we know the constants are, what some variables might be, the areas the Mets are going to have to fill, some spots, where the Mets might be able to fill internally. Are there prospects that are in the organization that are ready to help the 2025 Mets the way that a Mark Vientos was able to help the 2024 Mets, or a Francisco Alvarez was able to make his impact on the 2023 Mets? So let's get into it. Let's kick it off. And I think the biggest place you start with is the $170 million that are coming off the books for the Mets this offseason. And David Stearns met with the media on Wednesday, and he talked about the financial flexibility that the Mets are going to have.
I would like to quote him directly. What David Stearns said is something different than I think we've ever heard in our lives as Mets fans.
Let's hear it.
The quote was, "The entire player universe is potentially accessible to us. I envision us taking advantage of that opportunity." This is it, Mets fans. This is, that's the kind of thing you've been waiting to hear for years and years. That's the thing me and you as kids were always waiting to hear. And the moment is upon us. We have an amazing ownership group in Steve and Alex Cohen. We have an incredible president of baseball operations in David Stearns. And everything he said in that press conference would lead you to believe that they're going to go for whatever it is that is possible. Like, you're not going to see any hesitance to go full throttle. That's what David Stearns said. We're not saying anything outside of that.
Yeah, and I think that it starts with the starting pitching rotation, where as of right now, the Mets have Kodai Senga under contract, David Peterson under contract, Tyler McGill under contract.
Paul Blackburn, who is coming back from an injury.
Who's coming back from an injury. The Mets will see if they choose to tender him a contract or not. But Luis Severino is going to be a free agent. Sean Manaea is going to be a free agent. Jose Quintana is going to be a free agent. So right there, the Mets are going to have a couple of spots in the rotation to fill. We know that, whether it's by retaining guys and re-signing a couple guys that were here or adding from the outside. That's one area that the Mets are probably going to make some moves in the starting rotation. Now, you look at the position player pool. Here are some constants that we know. We know Francisco Lindor is here to stay. That's great news. If you say that every WAR is worth about $10 million, then Francisco Lindor was worth about $70 million this year. So the contract that the Mets gave him, the 10-year, $341 million contract that they signed Francisco to right before opening day 2021, that contract has turned into an absolute bargain for this Mets team. And Francisco is in the prime of his career. He's honestly been getting better and better, seemingly more comfortable being in New York. This was 21, 22, 23. This was year 4 for Francisco in New York. He has become the leader of this team. Yeah. When you're the new guy in town, it's tough to become the leader instantly, join a clubhouse as the new guy. It's not that simple.
No, we talked about this as fans in his, we didn't know each other in 21, but me and you had a conversation about this in 22, that if you look back at his 21 year, and a lot of fans said this, it was similar to Carlos Beltran. Beltran struggled in his first year here. Yeah. And Francisco Lindor really only struggled in the first 2 months. He had a really tough first 2 months in 2021.
Yeah.
And then just really, by the end of that year, we had the 3 home run game against the Yankees.
Yeah, he had a great September.
He had an amazing September, and he's had an amazing September in 3 straight years, and that's including a year where he missed half the September.
Right, with the back injury, and then he brought it into the playoffs, where he was fantastic also, sparking big rallies by drawing big walks, of course, the grand slam, the leadoff home run that he hit. So we know Francisco Lindor is here. We know that we can count on him, and quite frankly, like I said, I feel like he's getting better and better as time goes on. So That's one thing to absolutely be excited about. Another one of those constants is Brandon Nimmo.
Yeah.
Who inked the 8-year deal, and he's been worth every penny, whether he's hitting leadoff, hitting second, hitting third, playing left field, playing center field. Brandon Nimmo is a very valuable asset to have on this team long term. We know he's going to be a staple in the Mets outfield. He plays constantly. The injury issues that plagued him earlier in his career, they seem to be behind him. I know the plantar fasciitis we mentioned, kind of a freak thing. He played through it. He was on the field when he had the hand injury in 2023. Played through it, had a great season. So Brandon Nimmo is another constant. Then you have the 2 young guys who are incredibly valuable assets. One of them, Mark Vientos, who was under team control for a long time. I think he hit 5 home runs in the playoffs, 27. So he had 32 total home runs this year between the regular season and the postseason.
He's the franchise RBI leader for the playoffs now.
For a single postseason.
For a single postseason, he is the franchise home run leader in his first real postseason appearance.
Correct. And then you have Francisco Alvarez, who was in his age 22 season, who we were sitting in these seats last week, and the conversation was being had. Do the Mets decide to sit him and go Luis Torrens? And Francisco Alvarez answered the call in games 4 and 5. He was an on-base machine. I think he had 7 hits over those final 2 games. This is a kid who hit 25 home runs in his age 21 season. In 2022, it was a strange regular season for Francisco. Comes out of the gate, guns a-blazing. Goes down with a thumb injury. In my opinion, his injury in many ways changed the Mets lineup. When they started, they had the 7-game winning streak. Started here against the Royals and the Pirates. They went to LA. They won the first 2 games there. And then they hit the skid a little bit.
Yeah.
coincided with the injury to Francisco Alvarez.
It did.
His absence changed the lineup. It got a lot shorter. He came back in June. You remember the first 2 or 3 games, he looked a bit rusty. Then he had the big Subway Series, hit the opposite field home run against the Yankees, and he was full back. And between the time he came back and July 5th, which is another pivot date for me in Alvarez's season, he was OPSing over 1,000. It was like, oh my gosh, this guy in the lineup changed. And once again, the Mets were really, really a tough, long lineup to deal with. And then July 5th happened. And I've talked with you about this. July 5th was the date that he got hit by a pitch by Paul Skeens on the right elbow. Or the left elbow, excuse me. Not wearing an elbow guard. And it seemed like his approach at the plate changed a little bit. And maybe there was no injury that, was keeping him out of the lineup. Of course, he had a bad bruise, I'm sure, but he got hit by a pitch. But it seemed like it changed something in his approach for a little bit. And then he dialed it back in. Late August, you remember the walk-off home run he hit against the Orioles. So it was up and down, some weird injuries, but you go back to 2023 and the power he displayed, and you look at what he did at the end of the postseason, throwing runners out, controlling the running game, and getting on base nonstop. He is an absolute stud. He's also just 23 years old, or going to be 23 years old next year. And for him to have garnered the experience playing in the postseason, we know that he was upset, emotional in the dugout after the final out of the LCS. Francisco Alvarez is only going to become a better, stronger, more ready, more hungry for those moments type player. For him to get all this experience at 23, being the catcher, the field general of the baseball diamond, it's bad news for the rest of the league.
And another moment I think I loved with Alvarez was what he said about Starling Marte, where he said after he was struggling in that game where all the fans were saying, oh, should we see Luis Torrens replace him? Alvy said Starling Marte walked up to him and he said, Starling Marte doesn't talk very much, but Starling Marte came up to me and said that I'm doing a good job and just to keep my head up. And he was like, that means a lot to me because Starling Marte really doesn't talk, which if you have heard stories about Starling Marte, he does not like to talk. That is a thing. And he has even said himself, he does not like to talk. But yeah, no, this postseason is so important for these young guys because it's not just playing in the playoffs, it's also getting to see what that atmosphere is like and kind of getting used to it, making it feel regular. And another guy that did not play, was not on the official roster, but was here for it is Brett Beatty.
Right.
And I do want to mention that that's an important thing for a guy like Brett. Brett was able to be here for a deep playoff run, see what the ballpark is like, and get that kind of, not that baseball players or athletes need that drive to get here, but it definitely adds something when you get to look up and you get to see from the dugout what it's like to be out there.
Well, Mark Vientos was here during 2022, and
Exactly.
he got a taste of being at Citi Field for the postseason, and he's talked about that. And the situation that Beatty's in, like the situation Vientos was in this time last year, was nothing was handed to Mark Vientos.
No.
He had to earn a job, and that's a good thing when you can put a young player, in that position, when you could build enough depth. Like the Mets signed JD Martinez in late March, and it seemed like Mark Vientos was out of it. There was no opportunity for him. There were no at-bats for him. And he came up, used his opportunity, had a walk-off home run, then went back down, continued to hit, came back up in middle of May, and he became the everyday third baseman. And, the bat was always there. If you paid attention to the minor leagues and followed Mark in 2021, 2022, 2023, even this year when he was at Syracuse for a little bit, he's always hit. If you pay attention, there was never a doubt that he was going to hit. It's the glove that has really come a long way. But I think it's advantageous when a team has the ability to, make a young player earn his playing time. Don't give it away.
Well, David Stearns actually said in the press conference today when asked about Brett Beatty, bringing up Mark Vientos and his battle to get that position, saying that one thing that's great for a baseball team is when guys are battling for their position.
Yeah, it's healthy.
And when guys are fighting for a spot on the team. And he said they're proud that they're a team that's able to give people those opportunities and let them take an opportunity and run with it all year. And, like you said, Mark Vientos was hitting at AAA. Brett Beatty is a guy, before he got his real playing time up here with the Mets, didn't have a ton of spots at AAA. Had a really limited experience there. Then
he played 6 games before he was called up to the majors.
So now we're talking about a year where he put a really, really, I would say incredibly impressive AAA resume together this year. If he doesn't get injured towards the end of the season, that September call-up, is most likely his. I think that's a fair thing to assume. We don't know anything, but like you would have to guess a guy matching like he was. It felt like he was hitting a home run every night at AAA, just like it used to feel like Mark Vientos was. So you got to take that experience he had this year and that same want that Mark Vientos had going into this year's spring training. Brett Beatty's going to have that going into next year's spring training, and I think we're going to see a very different Brett Beatty.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I think that the Beattys, the Mauricios, the Acuñas of the world, the Mets have these guys that are going to be pushing, and it goes both ways. The young guys push the veterans, and the veterans push the young guys. And like we said, and like David Stearns said on Wednesday, it's a healthy competition, and it's an advantage for a team to, number one, be able to meld the younger players and some veteran players that you either acquire via free agency or through trade. These are all situations where come spring training, position battles are good for a team. And, we saw it pay off with a Mark Vientos. I just like when a team doesn't have to hand over a starting job out of spring training to a young player where if it doesn't work out, and this is a hard sport, and sometimes, we've talked about this also, sometimes young players never struggle in their lives until they reach the major leagues, and it's the worst time to start struggling. When you're doing so in front of 25, 30,000 fans against major league pitchers who see a weakness, the book's out on you, the entire league knows exactly how to get you out, and you're struggling to adjust back. Instead, it's a lot better when maybe there's a backup plan there. So if a guy does struggle, you can take him away from the spotlight, not have him go out there and continuously struggle and have that struggle deepen. And that's exactly what happened with Mark Vientos this season. He was ready to flourish. He showed the Mets, hey, guess what? I'm a top 3 third baseman in the National League. Play me every damn day. Because he was ready to take on that burden, and he ran with the opportunity, and now the Mets have themselves an absolute keeper. So why I like the position the Mets are in so much is because they have 4 or 5 good young players that they know are in the mix already for 2024.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a great starting core.
We didn't even talk about Luis Angel Acuña,
who was another guy. Look, he came up late in the season. He filled a lot of roles. He was fast, speed off the bench. He could play a lot of positions. I don't think the Mets necessarily expected him to go on the tear at the plate that he did, hitting home runs, extra base hit machine. But yeah, he's a guy also that could factor in. I mean, the Mets have some guys under contract right now, so there's a logjam, I'd say, at a bunch of different spots. Second base, does Ronnie Mauricio come back? We know David Stearns on Wednesday said he hasn't started baseball activities yet. His recovery has been a bit slower, but that's okay because it's October 23rd. If he could be ready to go by February, we're set. Jeff McNeil's in the mix, of course. Obviously, you have a shortstop who's going to be a steadying force. Mark Vientos over at third base, Brett Beatty. So there are a lot of guys in the mix. And what's great for the organization is eventually, cream rises to the top. And someone is going to run away with these jobs, and that's a good thing. You want that. That is what brings the best out of everybody, and that's how you find that production. So Acuña is one of those guys. Jet Williams could be another one of those guys in 2025 as well. I mean, it was kind of a lost season injury-wise for Jet Williams. He's playing at the Arizona Fall League right now, OPS hovering right around 800, doing the things he does, walking, stealing bases, putting the ball in play. Yeah, he'll probably start the year maybe at Binghamton, maybe at AAA. But at some point, could he possibly force his way into Queens? Maybe so. Where's everyone going to play? It's a good problem to have.
Yeah,
that's what you want is good problems to have.
There's also more prospects at AAA and even AA that could always factor in. JT Schwartz, Ryan Clifford, Rowdy Jordan, just guys that you might not have seen come up last year, but it's a whole new season, and there's going to be pieces that need to be filled in throughout the year. I mean, we saw Pablo Reyes get called up towards the end of the year for an important spot. We saw Eddie Alvarez get called up at the end of the year for an important spot.
Luke Ritter's another guy. I mean, a couple of the guys you mentioned, Ryan Clifford can play the outfield, can play first base. Rowdy Jordan can really play all over the place. Luke Ritter, infield, outfield, he can play all over. JT Schwartz, more of a traditional first baseman, but yeah, there are a lot of good position players that could see at-bats at one point or another for the Major League Mets next year. They are rich with what they already have in-house, and that's what excites me because we mentioned the $170 million coming off the books. Now it's how do they wisely go about plugging the holes, seeing what fits with their model. and winning baseball games that way in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, look, the point of the episode of this podcast is at this point, we're not going to speculate on guys that they could go out and sign.
And we're never really going to do that here on the podcast. That's not our job.
No, we're not allowed to. Look, let's just be very honest. I would rather just be straightforward and honest than have to deal with comments.
Yeah.
We work for the Mets. This is a team-run podcast. So one thing we are not going to be here doing is saying the Mets should go out and sign person A, person B, person C.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense for the kind of show we're doing.
Right.
But what we can do is tell you internally what is here, what is available, and then
we can acknowledge who's a free agent.
Yes, we can acknowledge who is a free agent, who's out there, but we're not going to say to you, if the Mets don't sign this person, it's the biggest failure of the year.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about rumors. We're not going to acknowledge rumors. But
no, you're not going to hear about a signing on this podcast till that press release is out.
Right, but the free agency pool is what the free agency pool is, and what the Mets needs is what
David Stearns said, like we quoted, entire player universe is potentially accessible to us.
I think what we're getting at is it's going to be a very exciting offseason as the Mets build around a very exciting core with some pieces that we know are going to be here for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years. The Mets have a great core in place, and I feel like they're getting younger as time goes on. The last couple of years, they've had one of the older average age rosters in baseball. Now, a guy like Adam Ottavino, who was 37 years old, there's only 26 guys on the roster. So when you have a couple guys who are 36, 37, it'll bring the average age up. But the core of the Mets, I feel like, is getting younger as we go along. And a lot of that has to do with the trades that the Mets made in 2023. Another guy we haven't mentioned is Drew Gilbert.
Yeah, Drew. Well, and just real quick to the point you were making about how the median was very high 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Let's just think about three players I'm thinking off the bat right now.
Verlander,
Scherzer, and Escobar.
Right. And before that, start of the season.
And James McCann. I mean, you're talking.
And people forget, Robinson Cano. No, it was 2022.
21 was Cano, right?
22 also.
Yeah. He was here in 22. Oh, yeah. He played
opening
the first
day.
Opening day. Oh, Jackie Robinson Day. His favorite day of the year.
Yeah. So, the Mets are getting younger. They're getting athletic.
Look at the infield now. I mean, look, this past year, Pete Alonso, under 30. Francisco Lindor, under 30. Mark Vientos, way under 30.
24.
So, I mean.
Alvarez, 22.
It's a good time to be a Mets fan, and it's a good time to especially keep an eye in the minor leagues because John and I, Future of Flushing, which is now a subsidiary of Meet at the Apple, where you'll see our minor league content living right here. Luckily, we've been covering the minor league of the Mets for the past 2 years, and there's a lot of information we could bring to the table on these guys. A lot of these guys, we've had conversations at. Those interviews are publicly accessible to all of you. But Drew Gilbert, a guy we did not bring up, who won the first ever check swing challenge. So
he did. That's a good fun fact. Next time we talk to Drew, we definitely have to bring that up. But I think the point that I really want to get at is the Mets have, for the first time in a while, I think, going into 2025, a number of guys at the top end of the minor league system that can help the Major League Mets from a position player standpoint. They also have that when it comes to pitching, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you mentioned Rowdy and JT Schwartz, and I mentioned Luke Ritter and Drew Gilbert and possibly Jet Williams and Luis Angel Acuna and Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio. There is a pretty thick chunk of guys that we just mentioned that at one point or another in 2025 can not only take at bats for the Mets, but make an impact at Citi Field. And that's really exciting, knowing that they have that volume of guys who could fill in that category.
And you know what makes me excited to think about too? Because we've been in periods with the Mets where we had that top level of minor league talent. Like when we had Beatty, Vientos, and Alvy all ready to come up, right? And then you would look deeper into the system and you'd be like, oh wait, does it stop there?
Right.
And now I'm thinking we have this chunk that is kind of almost boiling over the pot, ready to go.
Yeah.
And then you go lower, and then there's still a ton of talent. I mean, if we go through every system, and again, I know we're covering 2025 right now, but I wanted assure fans that you still have guys like Nick Morabito to look after. You still have guys like Ronald Hernandez, Marco Vargas. You have all of this talent Jeremy Rodriguez. All of these guys still at the lower level that as these guys make their debut this year or possibly make their debut, the guys from the bottom are also making their way up. And it's like we used to talk about in Future of Flushing, that trickle up economics. But this is not one of those situations the Mets have been in before where it's a top heavy system.
And what's the best for me is that when you don't have to rely on those guys necessarily, and I think this is me summarizing what I was trying to say before, when you have major leaguers in place and these guys that are on the cusp, but maybe there isn't room for them. The same thing we saw this year with Mark Vientos. That's when the greatness comes out. When a guy needs to force his way into the major leagues, that's when you're in the richest position as a team. And that's what the Mets have. They're not relying on the young players, but they have a lot of good young players that can come and make an impact and force the hand to give them regular plate appearances. That is a luxurious position to be in. And that's a position I foresee the 2025 Mets being in. And that's one of the many reasons why I am so excited for this upcoming season. Man, all I want is April 2025. I'll
take February being down in Port St. Lucie.
Well, that's going to be great too. But if I could close my eyes and just snap we're there right now, how amazing would that be? You got the Stanley Cup playoffs, start them up, start them going, get them going.
I saw your tweet that you said, can we just start the playoffs next week?
And then 2025 Met baseball's back.
Yeah.
I mean, I cannot wait for April.
And a deep next playoff run.
Yeah, exactly. And the Jets will be drafting 5th or something like that.
Hey, man, let's look back.
They'll be drafting like 13th.
Let's look back, man. Did we think in May, when the team was 11 games under 500, did we think that the season was going to go longer than the Jets season?
Jets season isn't over yet.
I know. They have a 48% chance to make the playoffs.
They do.
But still, did you think that
that'll be 28 next week?
Did you ever think that this would be a scenario?
No, I did not.
Did you?
No one did.
No, I mean,
no one did.
No, but I mean, anyway, we digress. Now, I think it's time to talk about some arms in the system, guys that can make an impact this year. Let's start from the top, work our way down. There's the most notable names that we could talk about: Brandon Sproat, Blade Tidwell. Brandon Sproat is a guy where AAA wasn't easy for him, but I think there's a lot of factors that go into that, and we spoke to him about that. I think one of those factors is AAA is a hard adjustment for so many different reasons. It's a whole different league, different ball, also a run-heavy league. And I think the rule changes and the stuff they're testing out is a tough thing to adjust to for somebody who's about to make that jump to the major league level, which Brandon Sproat said to us.
Yeah.
Where think about it, like you've played baseball one way for your entire life. You're at the moment where you're about to make your jump to the big leagues, and then that's when you go, all right, let's do some wacky science experiments right now.
Yeah, Sproat is an ultra-talented kid. He's refined. He went to college. He has 3 good pitches already. There's a reason why when he went to the Futures game, he was fielding questions from reporters asking him if he'd be willing to pitch out of the bullpen or not. And he said, I'll do anything to get to the major leagues. He's there. I mean, he's one step away. We could say that for sure. He was the Mets minor league pitcher of the year. He is catapulted way up prospect rankings. So I think he's the easy one to think about for 2025 to help the Mets. You mentioned Blade Tidwell, who David Stearns mentioned today. Blade spent a large chunk of last year at AAA, had some good success. He also ended the 2023 season at AAA, had good success there. Blade Tidwell is another one of those possible arms that could help the Mets, but there are some other guys also. You talk about AA. Joander Suarez, who did reach AAA at the very end of the season.
The day we went, right?
Yeah, he was called up extremely late in the season, but he's a guy that can make an impact. Nolan McLean, who a lot of people really like. He's given up hitting. He's focusing on pitching full-time. He ended the season at AA Binghamton. He was there for a majority of the year. Could possibly start at AAA. Once again, another guy that could be one step away from reaching the majors. Jonah Tong, who had a breakout season in 2024.
This was the year of Jonah Tong. I mean, this was, although I would say Brandon Sproat, obviously pitcher of the year, I would say got the most attention of any of our prospects. I would say Jonah Tong had the biggest emergence of a guy in our system because Jonah Tong was in the system the year before. People weren't talking about Jonah Tong 2 years ago the way they were talking about him this past year, and that's because Jonah Tong just something clicked this year, and once he got going, he did not stop. I mean, devastating 12-6 curve. Profile like Tim Lincecum, who's somebody he studied a lot and has said that he grew up watching his tape, trying to pick up different things from him that he could. And I would say and this is no discredit to anybody else, one of the smartest guys we've spoken to.
Yeah, incredibly cerebral. And he finished the season at Binghamton.
Yeah.
He got a late promotion and he dominated. I think he threw 6 no-hit innings in his Binghamton debut after dominating high A. So he'll probably start the year at AA. But again, this is a guy who got double promoted during the season, made the Florida State League his you-know-what, was quickly promoted to high A, dominated there, and was rewarded at the end of the season by getting a taste of AA, knowing as he goes into his offseason progressions where he needs to be, where the bar is for him to be better than AA hitters. And could he be a guy that winds up at AAA midseason and possibly, if he pitches well there, make the big leagues? I don't know. And what I love about this front office is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to player development and to promotions. The Mets, especially this regime, they're not afraid to double promote. And if they think a guy is ready to come up, even if he hasn't checked every box, played X amount of games at whatever level, or gotten X amount of plate appearances, or if they think he's ready to make an impact, then he's going to come up. I mean, we saw with Acuna. Acuna struggled at AAA.
Yeah.
And say what you want, why that was the case. He said that, the lighting isn't great there. Whatever it might be, the Mets felt like he was ready to help them with their needs, and they brought him up. And when their star shortstop was down, Acuna filled in seamlessly, made all the plays.
This team doesn't make the playoffs without Luis Angel Acuna.
100%. He provided offense, he provided defense, and the Mets were aggressive with promoting him. So you don't know which of these names that you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, it's kind of far-fetched. He's only made 1 or 2 outings in AA, so I'm not sure. Next, you don't know. And there's no direct path. And that's what I love about the way that this front office is doing business, is that everyone gets evaluated separately on their own individual terms. And there are a lot of young players that you guys should all be excited about that can make an impact here at Citi Field before you expect them to.
Yeah. It was
How about Jack Wenninger?
Jack Wenninger, yeah, who just another guy who shot up the system this year.
Yep. Drafted in 2023, I believe. Started the year, I think, Florida State League. Huge strikeout numbers. Did the same thing in Brooklyn. Another guy, and another college kid. The same thing goes with Blade Tidwell. Blade's a college guy, so obviously college guys are a bit more mature. I mean, we talk about some of the big injuries the Mets had in the bullpen this year. Brooks Raley was one of them. Sean Reed-Foley, who was pitching high leverage.
Dude, I was looking at just the names on. I was Nate Lavender.
Nate Lavender, Daniel Nunez, but there's another one that a lot of people forget. Christian Scott. Christian Scott could have helped this Mets team, whether he was in the starting rotation or he was helping them in the bullpen. Christian Scott, who, by the way, was a reliever in his college days, so he's used to that, he could have absolutely helped this Mets team. So they are rich in options, and we've seen David Stearns' teams use good young players in the bullpen, especially late in the season, to try to maintain innings. We saw it with Brandon Woodruff. So there's a lot to like here. There really is. We're not just blowing smoke here. This is why we're so excited for the offseason to get going and things to take shape and for us to get down to Port St. Lucie, Florida for pitchers and catchers to start.
I can't wait.
It's going to be incredible because this organization is in an incredible spot. And it's also great that I think that a lot of franchises envy the starting pitching situation that the Mets are in right now.
Well, I think that a lot of franchises envy not only the development they're seeing, especially like from the kind of the bottom working its way up, like we said before. But also, David Stearns brought this up in the press conference too, and something I've thought about all year, which is when you take on kind of, let's say, projects like they did with Chaminade and Luis Severino last year. 2 guys who came in on 1-year deals, Chaminade with a player option for a second year. You come into a team with a 1-year deal when you haven't had the recent success that you would have wanted. You come in on a prove yourself deal, and you're able to have the years that they had. What that shows other free agents out there is, this team has figured something out. This team can benefit me.
They could take my skill set and make it work and help me have success. But also, a lot of teams are tied into long-term contracts with pitchers who, are either hurt or underperforming the contract that they signed. Like that's a risk you take when you sign a free agent pitcher to a multi-year deal. The Mets don't really have anyone that they're having buyer's remorse about right now. They're in a power of position to revamp their starting rotation. A lot of these guys went deep into October, pitched a lot more innings than they're used to. I remember after the World Series run the Phillies went on in 2022, they came back in 2023 and some guys got off the slow starts, and a lot of people said, well, these guys shattered the walls that they had been used to when it came to their innings limits. And pitching deep into October can have an impact on a rotation the following year. Right now, the Mets don't necessarily need to worry about that because they can rebuild their rotation going into 2025 if they want to.
Also, if you look at the last few years, if you look at the free agent pitching over the last few years, and guys that could have been signed, and again, we won't name any names, but a lot of the guys that ended up getting signed were deals that there might be buyer's remorse from if you were the Mets looking into this next season.
100%.
I mean, I will leave it at that, but I think there's been some really...
Free agency can be a treacherous game.
It can.
It could be a glorious game.
Yeah.
but it could be a treacherous game.
And let's look back at last offseason when you were seeing some of those early acquisitions and fans were questioning what the Mets were doing. Now going into this next year, say the Mets do make one or two moves like that, where last year you were doubtful. Don't you have that little bit more of confidence of, oh, wait, like I saw this work out. I know what the kind of the thought process is here.
Well, everyone should believe in the Mets front office and what they're doing. David Stearns and company. Like there should be no doubt.
But I'm saying that now that there's a proven year of, we saw the plan in action.
Yeah.
Like last year we were two people that outside of doing the podcast and working for the team, we were saying to people, hey, no, look, like some of this stuff makes sense. Even Sean and I remember we had a conversation where there was a lot of stuff about Sean and I when he got signed last year. And it's like recency. I think it was like if you looked at his like previous 30 starts.
Well, he introduced the sweeper, and the sweeper had become a big weapon for him in San Francisco. And once he started throwing that, it was a pitch that he was really dominating with. So you saw hints of a maturation, and then obviously this year with the Chris Sale exposure, and then him throwing more cross body, and that being a weapon, an effective weapon for him.
And I want to give credit to the Mets staff here because it takes Sean Manaea seeing that and being able to translate it, but it also takes a staff able to kind of work around that.
And to apply it.
And Jeremy Hefner said to us in an interview, he was like, his job is to kind of talk to guys, figure out what they're going for. And he was like, it's always better if it's their idea coming to me than my idea going to them. So it's working with these guys and figure out what they're trying to work on and how I can best apply myself to that.
Yeah, and that's a big part of player development, which doesn't end when a player reaches the major leagues. Guys are always getting better. You know, some guys add a leg kick to their swing, and they have success with that. You know, there's so many examples of that. What the Mets are doing right now is, you know, David Stearns has always been able to win at the margins. When he was running the show in Milwaukee, you know, sometimes he had to be more creative. He had to find, you know, value in players. He made a trade last year. He brought in Tyrone Taylor, who was an invaluable part of this outfield.
He wasn't even the trade target on the time on paper.
Offensively, defensively, he turned out to be an absolute steal. And a winning team needs a Tyrone Taylor, a guy that is going to make all the plays in the outfield, who will make some exceptional plays in the outfield. Had the Mets won Game 3 of the LCS, I know it's a big if, but that catch he made, was one of the best catches we saw all season.
100%. Some of the biggest hits this year too.
100%. Signing Jose Iglesias. I know we talked about this on Sunday night. Say it again. You know, that's a winning at the margins move. And obviously no one saw the secondary and tertiary impacts that Jose Iglesias was going to have. But he's been a really good major league player, great defender, puts bat to ball. There was a lot to like there. He was depth. And that depth wound up, obviously, you know, you could say, I don't want to say saving the season, but obviously the impact that he had and his arrival and the Mets turnaround coincided, probably no major coincidence, but that was a shrewd minor league signing. So the Mets have the front office in place that can win at the margins, you know, building a bullpen.
Well, let's talk about real quick about the Jose Iglesias move. And the same way I said before with Manaea and Severino, where players see that and go, this is a team I want to be a part of. Those upper level minor league deals that we see teams sign where you get that depth, Jose Iglesias and what he did with the Mets, that's an example because everybody's heard it. David Stearns has said it. Jose Iglesias has said it. The Mets said to him, we will give you a chance if you sign this minor league deal.
And he could have gone to spring training, not made the team, and said, that's it, I'm out.
Exactly. But he listened to them. He trusted them. And then when it was time for somebody to get called up, he got his call up, and it was the right move. So that's another thing where you're seeing this organization really build a name for itself and a trust with the players, not just the players on the team, but free agents, where you're going to see free agents see what they've done with players currently, seeing how they've been taken care of, and go, oh, wait, this is a place I want to be a part of. We've seen that with the Dodgers the last few years, where the Dodgers have really good upper minor league signings where they have guys that are ready to go on the cusp of an injury. And I want to bring up from David Stearns' press conference, the thing that this team has been preaching since it was purchased by Steve Cohen was East Coast Dodgers. And I did love that David Stearns said that's not the plan anymore. The plan now is we're the Mets. And he said he wants people to look at the Mets as there's no more we're trying to be the East Coast Dodgers. Now we're trying to be the Mets, and we want people to say they want to be the Mets.
And I think the Mets are building their own culture in terms of player development, in terms of marrying the two worlds, the player acquisition world and the player development world. You know, Mark Vientos was a player development victory. And now he is a big part of this team moving forward. Alvarez, international free agent signing, your starting catcher, hopefully for the next 10 years. Each international free agency class under Steve Cohen has yielded big returns so far in the minor leagues. The Mets have done a great job netting a bunch of international free agent talent. They've done a great job in the amateur draft. And they've also done a really good job in major league player acquisition and scouting. And that's how you become a model franchise. And that's how other franchises say, I want to be the West Coast Mets, let's say. By doing all those things well, it doesn't, the reason why it doesn't happen overnight and why there's no true quick fix is because you really do need to build from the ground up. And that can take 3-4 years as you get the talent in the organization. But once it bubbles to the top and it's making the impact on the major league surface, let's say it's an iceberg and that's the tip and you're seeing it, it's visual. All that's happening underneath that iceberg, unless you're following the minor leagues closely, listening to Future of Flushing, Meet at the Apple, it's about always bringing new talent in. So this way, if there is a player that you want to acquire via trade, and it is going to be costly in terms of player capital prospects, you can make that trade, go out and add that piece that you covet, and not feel like you're totally emptying the cupboard. The Padres have done a great job of this. The Padres have made a ton of trades in the last 4 or 5 years where they've been giving up tons of prospects to the point where some prospect huggers, get agita and get heartburn by just thinking about it. But it's okay because they've done a great job of replenishing the stock where they can make these trades and they're still a top 15 farm system. And the Mets I think the Mets are there already because they've been doing this now really since Steve Cohen has taken over. It's also nutrition. Are guys getting enough sleep? Are guys eating well? Travel.
At the minor league level and the major league level.
All those things, they matter. All of those things matter, and the Mets are a leader now in that space. And we are starting to see all these things come to fruition. The 2022 Mets, I feel like a lot of it was a temporary fix. A lot of the free agency, a lot of the things they did, they paid off in that one season. But it wasn't as sustainable. Like the guys that were on that roster, they weren't going to be part of a winner that was going to be doing it for 5, 6, 7 years, the same names each and every year. Now we're starting to see that.
While you were speaking, I had a kind of an epiphany where...
that always happens when I talk, right? Epiphanizing.
You make me realize. You bring out the best in me. Steve Cohen bought the team in 2021. Every season that Steve Cohen has owned the team has been... this is going to sound stupid, but like very obvious, but every season has been incredibly important for the future of this organization. You go to 2021, the signing of Francisco Lindor set the team up for a decade by bringing in like this leader.
Cornerstone shortstop.
Like a franchise player that we haven't had since David Wright. That's step one. Also, season one of Steve Cohen was not going absolutely over the top, taking it easy, kind of taking adjustment of what it is to own and run a Major League Baseball team.
Yeah.
2022.
101 wins.
He signs Max Scherzer. And for the first time in years, the Mets go out and sign what was the top free agent that year. Who was the top free agent at that time? And made it kind of, that was a big statement of guys are willing to come here because that was something we hadn't seen for a while.
Right. And then they also signed, let's not forget, Starling Marte, who was coveted by a lot of teams that were in win now mode.
And there were other moves around
Eduardo
that.
Escobar, Mark Canha were both acquisitions.
Adam Ottavino.
Adam Ottavino.
There was a lot of moves that year that you were seeing, oh, wait, okay. It's not just signing that number one free agent. It's also signing the pieces around that. Then 23, you sign Justin Verlander, but then halfway through the year, I honestly think we're going to go back, and as fun as important this year was for like a culture shift, as important a 101 win season was, I think we're going to go back in 2023 might be one of the most important years in this franchise's history when you think about it, because it was the reset year where they were able to kind of take account of everything, keep that core that they had at the time, but set themselves up for the future. When you look at where this team is right now, all the minor leaguers we're talking about being able to be where we are doesn't happen without 23.
No, I mean the acquisition of a Gilbert and the acquisition of a Ryan Clifford.
And not giving anything up, like only adding that year.
Correct.
It's huge.
Ryan Clifford is a very exciting young prospect. Carson Benj, another college bat, very exciting young prospect.
All the draft picks in 23. I mean, like, I think 23 is going to go down when you look at it as like that 1983.
Well, I know Howie Rose compared this, or maybe it was Gary Cohn, one of the two, compared this season to a 1984-85 season. Now, they didn't have the wild card back then. Otherwise, the 85 Mets definitely make the playoffs, and you never know what happens. But, I was thinking about other teams in recent past that made the playoffs as a wild card, won a round in an upset in the LDS where upsets are more prone to happen because it's best of 5, not best of 7. And then didn't really continue that upward trajectory. Like the 2021 Boston Red Sox came to mind where, they were kind of at the end of a phase. Xander was there, he was leaving. Schwarber was there, he was leaving. They were at the back end of that. That kind of was a carryover of the 2018 team. Obviously, by then, Mookie Betts was gone. But they beat the Yankees in the wild card game. They beat the Rays in 4. They upset Tampa. And then they lost to Houston in 6. Kind of a similar trajectory to what the Mets did this year.
Yeah.
Where they split on the road in the LDS, came back home, didn't let it go back on the road for Game 5. And then they ran into a great opponent. The Astros went to the World Series that year. But that was kind of the end for the Red Sox in a way with that group. Bogarts was gone, like I said. Schwarber was gone. This is different. This is, and I truly believe this and truly mean this, this is a beginning for the Mets because of the flexibility they have financially, because of the cornerstones that we know are going to be in place that they have to build around, that so many teams wish they had, that wealth of talent that are going to be constants. And then, you talk about pitching flexibility. You talk about the bullpen. The Mets are going to have a bunch of guys who they lost due to injury back. The Mets have a bunch of options in the bullpen. I mean, let's just name some names right now. Jose Butto, maybe he's used as a starter. Maybe he's a reliever. I don't know, but that's a great weapon to have. Reed Garrett, Sean Reed-Foley back and healthy. Huascar Braziban under contract. Grant Hartwig, Bryce Montes de Oca, Tyler Zuber, who people are excited about.
Grant Hartwig is actually very exciting when you think about it because Grant Hartwig's profile is big ground ball guy. And one thing we saw with David Peterson, which was so successful this year, when you have an infield like we have with this team, ground balls are good for the Mets.
I mean, when you want to generate ground balls. It's better than fly balls. It's better than line drives. Strikeouts, ground balls, and pop-ups. Those are the easiest batted balls, ground balls, and pop-ups that turn into outs, and obviously strikeouts turn into outs too. But yeah, and again, guys develop. I mean, we saw Anthony Banda throwing 99 in the NLCS. Trevor McGill.
One of the million 2021 Mets, Anthony Banda.
Trevor McGill. When he was a Cub, when he was a Twin, he wasn't throwing 101. I remember watching the NL wildcard round against Arizona last year, and he's in the game, he's throwing 101. And then he's in the games in this wildcard round, and he's mowing Mets down.
You sent the same text about Trevor McGill and Banda, right?
Yeah.
He didn't throw 101 in 20.
But that's the thing is, teams get their hands on players and they harness ability. And this Mets team, like you mentioned with Sevy, like you mentioned with Sean Manaea, they've been Reed Garrett is another. Yeah. The no one in the crowd, 0-5. It feels like rock bottom. The Mets won that game. Reed Garrett played a huge role in that game. He came in, he threw 2 scoreless. He befuddled the Tiger lineup and bridged the gap to the 9th inning, and then the Mets scored the game and win the game, or scored
that was the start of the Reed. That was the start of the Reed Garrett month of dominance.
Yeah, but Reed Garrett, he had bounced around a little bit, and now other teams are saying, I don't remember Reed Garrett throwing 99. He's throwing 99 with a nasty sinker and a nasty splitter. So that's a success story that the Mets have had on their watch. I know people, didn't really fully appreciate Reed Garrett, but he was lights out from August through the end of the season.
I know. A lot of people got when your team gets eliminated, a lot of teams focus more on like the worst part of somebody's season than even the most recent part of somebody's season.
I think at a point he had gone 18 and 19 appearances of his were scoreless.
It's like in 22. A lot of fans look at Chris Bassett for his last start. They don't look at Chris Bassett for his season.
Yeah, he was money for that 22 Mets team. So,
but look, I think we've laid out everything we possibly can on this episode, and we're gonna have a lot of offseason content. We're gonna be covering minor league stuff. I'm sure we're gonna catch up with some players in the offseason, and we'll be here twice a week, maybe more if we have some content, but definitely twice a week. And we're just looking forward to that sweet, sweet Port St. Lucie air.
Yeah, but I think the biggest takeaway is, while, yes, the season just ended, and yes, it's upsetting that things went the way that they did. It's fine.
All episode had the badge on.
I knew, but I don't want to call attention to it. This organization is in a great spot.
Yes.
It really is. It's a very enviable spot.
If you listen to a David Stearns press conference and you don't just want to like run out and scream in a good way, I don't know what's wrong with you. Because every time I hear David Stearns speak, especially like if it's in the office, I just want to start a Let's Go Mets chant.
I'm with you.
And I almost started one at the end of that one today.
Well, I'm glad you didn't. But there's going to be a lot of enthusiastic Let's Go Mets chants deep into October in this very building over the coming years, because This organization is absolutely on the right path. It is absolutely on the verge of becoming a powerhouse in the National League. There are many reasons why that is the case, and we're excited to see it all unfold over the coming weeks and months leading into pitchers and catchers, and eventually opening day 2025.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. You can follow this podcast on Apple or Spotify. On our final episode of the season, I said you could follow me on Apple, and somebody commented and said, "How could we?"
No,
follow
that was
Apple?
that was the second to last episode.
Oh, okay.
That was the last one we
one
did here.
The last one we did here, somebody said that.
The
was,
last one was sad.
No, that was online.
There were no jokies in that one.
No, that one was like a serious, except for when I put on a Dodgers hat. Anyway.
No, you were serious about that.
I was serious about that. Anyway, follow us on Twitter at Vito F. Khaleesi, at JMB9191.
Are you watching the World Series?
No comment.
I am.
I'm watching the Knicks. I'm watching the Knicks, and I'm watching the Rangers for John.
Why is Hunter giving a thumbs down?
I'm just joking.
Oh, you like the Rangers now?
No, I don't. I was just making a joke.
Who's your favorite hockey team, Hunter?
It's the Islanders.
How are they doing so far?
It's early. Didn't we see it with the Mets? It's early.
That's right.
That's a good way
blue
to-
and orange
Yeah.
team.
It's plenty of time.
No, the Knicks lost their first game. It wasn't
Exactly.
pretty. Celtics broke a 3-point record. It wasn't fun.
Celtics hit 1,000 3-pointers last night.
I know.
Oh, that's an anomaly.
It's early in the season.
It was also an anomaly when in Game 7 against the Pacers, when the Pacers were scoring like 80% from the field. Like, it's just, this isn't a Knicks podcast.
Well, it's bad to have an anomaly happen in Game 7, but Game 1, it's not that bad.
Anyway, all right, guys. Thank you for listening. We'll be here for you all off season. Comment below. Let us know what you want to hear us talk about. If there's any topics you want us to hit, comment below.
Cooking
tweet
advice.
Tweet us. Let us know anything. But thank you guys for listening. It's going to be a fun off season. It's going to be an even better 2025. We'll see you soon.